Hello, welcome to part two, managing the heartsink feeling. And I'm Mark Rickenbach, and as you were seeing in part one, I'm a GP near Southampton, previous associate dean and a professor of healthcare at Winchester University. And the picture here is the heartsink picture by Rebecca Hawken that we've got permission to use. Thank you to Rebecca. And the references for the BMJ article that covers this content, and the website www.cric.co.uk that also covers this content. So we're going to talk about managing the heartsink feeling, and I hope you've had time to think about the next step and the questions that you had there. So we asked the questions: what do you do when your heart sinks? And what helps you and your patients most to do? And that was where we left you in the end of part one. And you may have considered that. And if you haven't done, you can just pause and pause the video and just think about those two questions. What do you do when your heart sinks? And what helps you and your patients most to do? And the first thing that you may do is you may have a good moan. And it's perfectly okay to have a good moan, but it just gets a bit wearing if you end up in a cycle of moaning all the time. So you're letting out your frustration, your stress, your anger, perhaps with the challenges you've had and how you haven't been able to move forward. And this is part of your heartsink feeling when you can't move forward in a consultation sometimes. Or if you haven't been able to move forward for several consultations in a row with the same patient. You can build up tiredness, and the risk is that you develop burnout. And burnout is where you become cynical, you step back from work, you've got ongoing symptoms that you can't get away from. And if you do get burnout, think about NHS practitioner health, which you can access very easily on the web, and they are very supportive and confidential as a service. So what strategies have you got? What might you have thought about when you answered those questions? Well, the first thing you could do is you could just ignore the cues. You could try and limit the topics of conversation in this challenging consultation where you are unable to move forward. You could try shortening the consultation. So that's one approach you might try. I'm not recommending these, but just going through what might be options. The next thing is you could become more aggressive and directive to try and move the consultation forward. You're trying to induce change where you feel things have become locked in the same pattern. By doing this, you're becoming a bit more clinician focused and directive, and you're guessing what might help, and you're trying to put that in place. Risky again. And the last of these three approaches you could take is just to be very passive and just let it flow over you, not really put too much effort in, wait for the end of the consultation, and minimize your contact. And all these approaches are risky because what's going to happen if you're not careful is you're going to get inappropriate interventions or referrals. You'll end up kick jerk responding to one or two of those issues that reach your consciousness as a doctor, and then the patient gets referred into hospital, and it may be they've been referred already before, or it's inappropriate referral and they get rejected in the hospital setting and they come back upset about that. And often, as you can see, you bounce around the practice and see different people in this situation if you're not taking it up and sorting it. You're not addressing the issues. There's clinical errors that are occurring. That's a medical legal risk. And by doing this approach, you're increasing the overall workload for the whole practice, and you're overusing appointments because people keep coming back again. And you get worse outcomes for the patient, and worse outcomes for the general practice you're in, and worse outcomes for yourself as a GP. And I've talked about GP, but of course, the same issues of heartsink apply to allied health professionals, other people in your primary care setting, and in secondary care, perhaps more important in secondary care. Now, I'm acknowledging here that we're in a real world, that there is a lack of time and there's a dramatic increase in workload occurring in primary care. So it's really difficult to be able to step back and think about how you handle a heart-sync associated consultation, a consultation where you're not moving forward in the way that you hoped you would. It seems to be stuck. But the question is whether you address it now with a slightly increased workload now or later, and with the accumulative workload of unresolved consultations. Do you put in the effort to prepare now, or do you accept there's going to be a long-term effort, an ongoing heart sync feeling? And do you believe in your own success? Do you really believe you can change the consultation? And I think the important thing is to believe you can change it. There are GPs, and we've looked at before in part 1 about how with experience you can overcome the heart sync consultation. So do believe that you can do it. And remember, the heart sync consultation is owned by you as a GP. It's not part of the patient. It is you. The patient may be associated with it, but you can control it because it's within you. So the heart sync feeling is really a cue. Like other cues, you might feel anger or you might feel sadness. If you feel anger, perhaps the patient's angry. If you feel sad, perhaps the patient's low and depressed. So if you're feeling heart sync, it's more of a cue. It's something about underlying anger, perhaps guilt or grief in the patient that's coming across. But it's very hard to tease it out. And this is the frustration with the heart sync situation. You don't quite work out what's going on. Sometimes it's a cue that there's many collective problems, and some of those problems have already been attempted to resolve, and some of them are new, and they're all coming to you at once in that consultation. It may be a cue that there's unrealistic expectations here. I'm thinking of a patient who comes in saying, I want a CT scan because I've got earache, or I want this done or that done. Or perhaps one of you isn't listening or believing what the other's saying. And I say one of you because it could be the GP part of you is not listening to the patient, or the patient is not listening to what the GP is saying. That what they're talking about is actually important. So the CT scan with the earache, actually, they might have also mentioned they had unilateral deafness that had recently come on, in which case you would be thinking about doing a CT scan. Difficult. Thing about the heart sync feeling is often there's an expressed dissatisfaction going on, and that's usually coming from the patient. And that expressed dissatisfaction may have been a learned pattern of behavior to try and get things done. By expressing dissatisfaction, then they were getting actions taken on their behalf. It may be a learned behavior within a family setting. It's hard to know, but just bear that in mind. And also you can use some of the techniques that you might have picked up in other settings like transactional analysis to try and work out what's going on. The child-adult relationship in transactional analysis is a typical one. They may be coming to you as the child, wanting you as the adult to fix them. But in so doing, they are almost passing the blame on to you and letting you shoulder the blame for something that's gone on. Or it may be the other way round, and they're coming to you as an adult and wanting you as the child and the doctor to do what they want. So you're trying to move back to an adult situation where you've got a exchange of information going on and a joint decision making. There may be bigger things going on here. There's the uncertainty of medicine and life itself. The fact that medicine doesn't cure everything. And they might be wanting you to do that, that you can't fix their life, and that life is a bit uncertain. Or it may be even deeper than this. There's a clash of cultural values or beliefs coming from the background of yourself as a GP and themselves. Different beliefs, different family values that are there. Or, and we've got to acknowledge this, they might be working outside the boundaries, that actually their behavior is too extreme to be handled effectively within your primary care setting. And that you might need to share that with other practices, or they may need to move to a new setting and have a fresh start after you've attempted all you can. And in my experience over 30 years, that might happen once every 3 or 4 years or so. after you've gone to great lengths to sit down with that person and you've drawn up a contract and arrangements and things just still haven't worked out. So what do you do when you've got a Heartsink consultation happening and repeatedly happening? Well, the first thing is to step back and review the records. Look through the past history. They're often long records, and it takes a bit of time to do this, but you're looking for patterns and you're making sure that your problem summary is up to date. Not only up to date, but with some text explanation of that next to that problem saying what has been done. And when you look at those patterns, you can work out what's been addressed already. And by updating the problem list, you can make it clear how it was addressed. And then as soon as you see that problem, you can say to yourself, right, I'm going to move on from that one. We're going to focus on something else today. And if it's brought up, you can explain what was done before. Has that problem been partly addressed and you need to revisit it? Or is it a new problem which doesn't fit with the pattern? And now you need to think about investigating and, as you would do normally. So you're prioritizing, you're working out what you accept and say to the patient, we need to work and accept that and work with it, what you are going to try and look at in a bit more depth, and what you think you might be able to resolve fairly quickly if you're lucky. It helps to have more time. So set double appointments if you can. Sometimes we have a message on the screen that says, always book with a double appointment to allow that more time. That is until you've resolved the Heartsink issue. Think about other things like, have you got adequate translator support? Have you made allowance for hearing difficulties or vision difficulties? And is there time for you as a GP to reset time for yourself, to sit back, have a cup of coffee, quick think, prepare for the next person? All right. Look after yourself. Have you got appropriate times and intervals set? Because often with a Heartsink consultation, the temptation is to bring them back early, or they come back early. You may need to negotiate set time intervals between those consultations to allow both of you to process what's been said and to try and move forward. I would also strongly advise a single, longer consultation. Time to ask about past social history, to get to know the patient. Because by doing that, you'll develop an understanding and empathy, which sometimes unlocks that Heartsink feeling completely, just from that single consultation. And for me, that's happened in the past. And sometimes it's a longer consultation. Once or twice, it's been a home visit where I've come to understand more about the situation and the background. And again, we've got information on the DocRick website you can look at. So we've talked about it being step by step. You might need to stage the consultations. I'm dealing with this problem today. All right, and the next one, we're going to deal with this today. After you've got that list out, we'll talk about. Think about what mode you're on. Are you in a listening mode or are you in a healing mode? And bear in mind that for some doctors, you go into the consultation always wanting to heal and fix and move on. That may not always be appropriate. To work out where you are in that consultation at that time. And think about how enthusiastic you want to be. We talked about blame and the patient wanting to perhaps sometimes offload blame on you for you to take responsibility, and how you might share that. But also you can go into the consultation feeling really enthusiastic, pumping yourself up, if you like, and letting that enthusiasm come across so that the patient may actually pick that up. It's a technique. I'm not saying you should have to do it every time. Involve the relatives. I think always think about when you can involve relatives, particularly in this sort of situation, but you do need permission from the patient and you do need to think about it carefully. But in my experience, it's always better to involve relatives, and they often give another insight into what's going on and the patterns that are happening already. And sometimes they feel valued to be brought on side, and also often the patient values that extra support, and they can help reinforce the suggestions and management approach. Also, when I haven't brought relatives in, there have been difficulties later with misunderstandings. So I think it really helps to bring them in. And if you're going to be sued for something, it's often by relatives. So medical legally, it's better to bring them on board if you've got permission. It helps to have a shared plan of some sort with the patient and for you both to acknowledge the approach you're taking. Sometimes it has to be a written contract if it's getting to the point where things aren't moving forward at all. But usually it's a shared verbal plan. And what you're trying to do between you is establish a better consultation pattern. Bring a list in. We're going to focus on this today. You can come again if you need to, but let's give it a 2-week window, things like that. If you go to the DocRic website, you'll see one called Negotiating the List. There's also things about pre-consultation questions and options. So the pre-consultation questions, the idea that, or the suggestion that you can get patients to write down their ideas, concerns, and expectations, so-called ICE. And by doing that, you're getting things out early on, before the consultation or at the start, so that you can understand what they're thinking, and you don't have to go around the houses a little bit to try and find it out. And also having a list of problems helps a bit, so you can prioritize whatever's on the list, so-called negotiating the list. So knowing that list beforehand and the ideas, concerns, and expectations about a particular problem helps. In the past, we did that with a written piece of paper, and we looked at it with 100 patients, and we noticed that when we looked at the analysis, doctors and patients felt more satisfied with the consultation, and the consultation became shorter. So that helps. But nowadays, you've got eConsult or other electronic consultation approaches which give you that information beforehand. Trouble is, they don't always cover ideas, concerns, and expectations so fully, and they don't always get a list of problems out, but they're a start. You could add in a sheet for that particular Heartsink consultation approach. And use options. Options mean you explain to patients all the things that could be done. If a relative is involved, that's even better, because then they can reinforce those options. And by doing that, you're sharing it. So you're taking away that blame or uneven approach. You're saying you can do this, this, or this. Include nothing, because doing nothing is an option. And include referrals, because referrals is an option, but often not appropriate. But if you talk about it, then you're explaining your thinking. And in the middle, you might be talking about x-rays, pros and cons, blood tests, etc. And often you'll be discounting things, but it's just covering that, so the patient knows you've talked about it and they can revisit it if need. Use the unlocking cues that come to you. Now, the problem with a Heartsink consultation is often you get lots of cues coming to you from all directions, and it's hard to pick out which one, the chest pain or the achy leg or the breathlessness, which one do you look at? So it's about knowing what cues you come across before, picking out one that might be the unlocking one, because sometimes something, when you explore it, just changes the direction. Sometimes you're going to have appropriate challenge. You're going to say, okay, can't do this. One way of doing that is talking about the what if approach. If we do this test, what will be the outcome? What do you think would be the outcome as a patient? And what is the possible outcomes? Will it change things if we do this? So that's a what if approach. Think about behavior gains and losses, because sometimes if you take one approach, you might undermine their own approach, and that may take away some of the gains that they've had from particular approaches. For example, being in the sick role sometimes helps people, and moving them out of that sick role can be a threat. And use diagnostic labels. It helps to have some sort of label, and even medically unexplained symptoms is really helpful. And some patients actually work with that and explain to their relatives and family, this is what I've got. And in so doing, they come to accept their symptoms, assuming they're safe and okay from your point of view as a GP to do that. And talking about safe and okay, your GP hat is always thinking about the serious, always excluding things that you might miss. With every consultation, you should be thinking, what's the serious thing that I'm missing? Now, what can I do about it? Or how can I help? So monitor for those warning signs, that blood that wasn't there before, that change in pattern that is new and you haven't seen before and you can't see in the records from before. That weight loss, that change in blood tests. And how often are you going to do these blood tests? Are you going to do them frequently, or are you going to say to yourself, right, new pattern change, I think it's time to do those blood tests again. They haven't been done for a couple of years. So, you're using those tests, but not overdoing it. And then you're thinking, finally, as a round off, techniques to end the consultation. Time has come, you have given your utmost, it is time to move on to the next patient. You need to think about those techniques and put them in place. And it may be like standing up, it may be like opening the door, it may be summarizing. It's polite but firm. Continuity is important. It helps to see the same doctor over time because that doctor gets used to them. Doesn't mean you have to see them all the time. Good continuity of care from the Health Foundation Care Programme was about 50% of the time. This programme was done over 2 years, extended to 3 years because of COVID. It was across 500,000 patients, 5 sites in England. And what they showed in this Health Foundation Continuity of Care programme is that continuity can be maintained or increased in the face of an overall decrease in continuity of care in the UK, which has happened, sadly. So continuity of care has been going down, but we as GPs can increase it and get back to where we were. Now, continuity is important for Heartsink because you, as I say, you get to know the patient, you get to know the best approaches. It means you're far ahead at the beginning of the consultation, not having to go over old ground. But you may share that continuity if you want to. You may pair up with another doctor, and you're sharing it with the team as well. So there's Continuity Counts is a website to go to. It's also on the DocRick website I mentioned. And there's a community on the RCGP web page, which you can access through myself on my NHS address. And there is a toolkit on the RCGP website. You just search RCGPC and then continuity of care. How about the organisational approach? We've talked about individual approaches, but actually as an organisation, you can help. You can review cases together. It was Tom O'Dowd who coined some of the phrases about Heartsink, who did the first review of cases, and he felt that that helped, and I think it does. You can discuss the issues and you can look about ways of sharing workload. Think about who's the usual GP and make sure that the usual GPs for those patients is roughly equal across the practice. One way of doing that is looking at frequent attenders. Frequent attenders may be Heartsink patients, but they also need more focus to work out why they're attending frequently and help them adapt their approach. Maybe that problems aren't resolved, or it may be their approach to the practice is that they often come, and try and allocate that out fairly across the practice. It's now possible to do using the tools that are on the current consultation clinical management systems. I talked about pairing of doctors, that may help you, and I talked about a consistent approach between the team, singing from the same song sheet so that if they see a different person, you're taking a similar approach, and you could lay that out in the records with the patient's shared consent. So we have a person who's been coming to the practice often. My GP colleague was getting frustrated with the situation. They couldn't move forward and they were getting a Heartsink feeling every time they heard the name of that person. They felt low, they felt their stomach full, they felt palpitations, they felt anxious. And then we looked at social prescribers in our practice. Before they came in as an ARS role, we tried to bring someone on side And we thought about involving the social prescriber for this person. And very soon afterwards, my GP colleague noticed that they hadn't seen this person for quite a while, that their heartsink feeling had settled when they saw them again, and that the consultation was a lot easier. And the reason being was that our social prescriber had introduced them to gardening. Now, this is Alan Titchmarsh. He's not a patient of ours, so I can use his photograph to illustrate the fun and pleasure of gardening. But for this particular patient, it unlocked things. They found something they were interested in and enthused about. They had social contacts, and their heartsink consultation seemed to disappear. And that's good for the patient and the doctor. Another organisational approach is to set up a high-intensity user service, as they called it here. This was an outcome from the continuity of care programme that I talked about earlier, and it was set up by, in the Somerset area, Dr. Kevin Haggerty was one of the lead GPs involved with that. It was actually run by the Red Cross, and it was involved with social prescribers with a GP lead linked in. And they had noticed that the heartsink consultation was more often if you were trying to deal with a patient in a continuity of care setting. So you set up your practice, you've got continuity of care in place, but actually that meant the GP had to help sort the problem out. And in so doing, they got a little bit of heartsink, but that was addressed. And using the techniques we've talked about, GPs were able to move forward. And with continuity of care, in that setting, they had reduced workload and they had improved access. So reduced workload, improved access with continuity of care, and better ability to handle that heartsink feeling. On DocRick, there is a complex consultation clinic site or page, and you can link to YouTube videos by doctors handling the heartsink feeling in complex consultation clinics. Dr. Tim Mercer was very enthusiastic about the challenges of handling complex consultations and how you can unlock them and move patients forward. And he finds it very satisfying and positive. But the message that comes out from here is if you set up a complex consultation clinic, think about how you share the workload against other things within your practice. Think about time to recover and recuperate and recharge after each complex consultation clinic session, and the support in place to help sort of work through any issues that are there. But that's a way forward. So the heartsink feeling, share it. Don't take it all on. Share it in confidence with colleagues. Look at the techniques. It can be a challenge and an opportunity. So some people, in fact, many experienced doctors, can move things forward, enjoy the challenge, and unlock things and help the patient. And put it in perspective if it's getting a bit much. A helicopter is a technique, and neuro-linguistic program, NLP technique. You stand back, helicopter over the situation, view it from afar, or even view it from afar and look at the world and think, right, this is a small issue, we can deal with it in a big setting. And you can do it. And if you're really struggling, don't forget NHS Practitioner Health is there and can support if you are having difficulties. Heartsink, owned by you, controlled by you because it's owned by you, it's within yourself. And it can be overcome. There are techniques. And tell others about these techniques, as well as discussing in confidence issues so that you can move forward. So I wish you luck. Heartsink can be a positive thing, and you can use it to your patient's advantage and your advantage. And I hope you're able to resolve them and get to a point where you don't have much heartsink at all. Good luck. And do come back to me. The contact details at the start of the video if need be. And there's the part 1 section if you haven't seen that. Thank you.